I'm going to start by asking you a question. And the question is, what's an Italian gardener who was gardening in the early 1900s got to do with counselling? Now, before you think that perhaps you've missed out some sort of famous psychotherapist who you didn't know about, or you're thinking about Carl Rogers and his potatoes, it's nothing to do with Carl Rogers and his potatoes. And this man wasn't a psychotherapist. But we're going to return to him later, and I'll tell you why he's important to us. So, um, first of all, I just wanted to know, how is your private practice going at the moment? Do pop a sentence in the comments if you'd like to share with us how your private practice is going at the moment. Here in Southend, we're basking in beautiful sunshine. Everybody is down at the beach and there's lots of people in the sea. And that means they probably aren't in a counselling appointment. And that's what the summer's often like, isn't it? You've got people on holiday, you've got parents looking after kids, you've got people paying for days out on holidays, their funds are stretched, or they might be taking on seasonal work in order to pay for everything. And all of that means that they are not in counselling. And also, as well, it has to be said, people often feeling better at this time of year, aren't they? So they often aren't thinking about having counselling. And the net result is that you, the counsellor, have an empty diary. Some of you will think to yourselves, great, I'm just going to relax and enjoy my summer. But for very many of us, it actually brings quite a lot of stress. If you're quieter than normal, it can be a bit scary because you're looking at your diary and you're wondering, will this pick up or is this permanent? When you're faced with few clients, that can put you into a bit of a tailspin. When you're a private practice therapist, you rely on your client appointments to bring you your income. We often see people, don't we, in the Good Enough Counsellors group saying, I was doing really well, and now I've had a real lull in inquiries and I'm beginning to panic a little bit. Has anybody got any ideas as to what I could do to market myself? So I don't think it's unusual, if you're going through a dry spell at the moment, to be thinking to yourself, oh gosh, help, I feel really scared by this. And when you're in this position, the best thing to do actually is to take a break. I just had an email this morning from Kristin Neff talking about self-compassion breaks. And that's almost what you need to do when you are in this panicky situation. Because when you're in this panicky situation, your brain really shuts down. And the only thing you can see are the fact that you've got great big gaps in your diary. And, you begin to get more and more scared. So it's really, really helpful to just almost have a reset. And having a reset actually really makes a difference to your brain and will actually help you to have ideas. The reason I say this is I was reading some research for the podcast last week, and I was reading about how when they first started scanning people's brains, they wanted a control group. So they told people to think of nothing. They just wanted people to let their brains go into idle mode. And to their surprise, to the researchers' surprise, they found that people's brains the parts of their brains were getting really active. And it's those sort of creative parts of the brains, the parts that have new ideas, that makes new connections. So actually giving yourself time off can actually really reset your brain and help you have new ideas about how you can market your practice. So think self-care. And I've actually had this experience today. So as you can probably tell, I've had my hair cut and blow dried today. And I'm sitting there. The hairdresser is blow drying my hair. It's quite warm. She wasn't chatting at that point. It's quite relaxing. I had my eyes closed. I was just relaxing. And suddenly this completely new idea, never had it before, never thought about it before, popped into my head. And I just had this fantastic idea for a new ebook. I just thought, oh, that's amazing. So I've written it down before I forget. And that's what happens when your brain is in idle mode. So if you're panicking, give yourself a break. That's the first thing I'd like to say. Now, moving on, sometimes the actual answer is hiding in plain sight. I don't know if you've had this experience, but sometimes you can't see the solution and yet somebody else can just see it for you. It's very easy to miss stuff when you're panicking. You see all the bad stuff rather than the opportunities. We often don't realize what is so clear to somebody else and could be right in front of your nose. So an example of this would be my client Nicola Potts, who's going to come on my podcast soon. And Nicola came to see me when she first started up in private practice, and we talked about her possible niche. And Nicola didn't actually know who she wanted to work with at that point. But when we dug into it, Nicola told me that she'd actually been working as a physiotherapist and her speciality was breath work. And that to me was just an instant sort of niche. It's just like, oh yeah, that's completely obvious. And when I said it to Nicola, she thought, oh, yes. And so it's transpired that Nicola actually now specialises in working with people with anxiety, with panic attacks, and she helps them with their breathing and with that sort of somatic side, really, of using the breath work to be able to help them with that anxiety and panic. And that's an answer that was hiding in plain sight. She hadn't seen it herself. And now we'll move on to our Italian gardener. So why is this chap particularly relevant to us as counsellors in the 21st century, sort of 120 years later? Why is he relevant to us? Well, he was called Perito, and he was an Italian gardener and an economist. And he noticed that when he was gardening with his peas, that 20% of the pea pods produced 80% of the crop. And this is a sort of rule of thumb that you can apply across all sorts of different contexts. And the reason I am telling you about it is because I think quite often you perhaps aren't making the most of what is working well already in your practice. So an example of this would be if you're somebody who often gets clients through a directory, so you know your directory profile is good enough, but for some reason you just haven't had any requests recently, are you making the most of that directory entry? And there's a few hacks that you can do to actually make more of that. So for example, yesterday I asked a question in the group, what have you done to help you with when you're going through a dry spell? And several people came back and said, I bought a top spot on counselling directory. And somebody else said, optimizing the fact that you can have 6 different locations on your BAC profile. So just think about it. Are you making the most of your existing opportunities? So take care. Thanks for coming. Bye for now.